Greetings, brothers and sisters. Got a lot of stuff to get to. Some Trump and Hunter Biden comparisons on the left and the right. I'll go through that. And there's some stuff to do with Kennedy and some other, just basically funny stuff here. It's always funny. And so I want to get to the air quality. We just had a whole thing. I did a little bit on my other channel, and I'm going to talk about that again tomorrow in a different way there. But I have a story that I think is relatively disturbing. Now, I've talked about internet spying, right? Many of you have left comments and stories similar where, like, for example, my wife and I will go for a walk in our pasture, and the only thing that'll be there was my phone, which is turned off. And we'll talk about something. And I will get recommended that thing on Facebook like 4 hours later, or on Amazon or something. There'll be some sort of way that, or even on YouTube sometimes, where the only place we'll talk about it is, where there's no access to no other spying device than my phone, my iPhone that's turned off. Or I'll go over to my wife's computer where she's working, and we'll talk about something, and then I'll come back to my computer, and they'll run an ad for it, right? And or whatever, these other things, YouTube video, whatever it might be. But there's some way that I can tell that they've been spying in ways that is not cool, is beyond me searching for something. It's one thing if you search for something on the internet and it starts recommending those things, but another when they're picking up private conversations. And that's bad. But what happened yesterday was almost inexplicable. So we have a bathroom floor that's made out of hardwood that's deteriorating, that's attached to what, would be considered the master bedroom. The overall floor is wood and needs to be redone. And the bathroom floor particularly has no finish on it. And we've been living here about 5 years. And so, I am the primary cleaner of this bathroom. And it's hard to clean because the floor is wood. And everything soaks into wood floor, so, it's not good if you come out of the shower wet or something, or bath wet or something or whatever. It's not good to have a floor that has no finish on it. And my wife and I have talked about tiling it. I don't have the skill to put in some, like maybe I could put in some sort of linoleum. We've talked about different ways of dealing with it, and also getting the bathroom redone permanently or something like that, right? But we've never been able to get that done. And so about 2 years ago, I said I was just going to buy some polyurethane, and I found a sort of a low odor, some place that does things for low toxicity. It's polyurethane is going to have something in it, but this is environmentally like a green company, right? And I ordered some for the floor, and also we need to do something about our chicken coop. It's been, it has a wood, it's a wood finish, and it's like stained, and it needs to be restained, and then something has to be put on it. So I got some polyurethane for, the chicken coop. And of course the chickens are very sensitive to, the toxicity. Birds are, right? Canary in a coal mine. And so, we hadn't done anything. Both of them just have been sitting in a box for 2 years. And my wife and I were talking back and forth about it. I'm very sensitive to chemicals, and, it needs 3 coats of polyurethane. At least the more you do, the better. And so finally I said, I'm just going to do it. And she said, all right, great. There was some debate about it, but it just needed to be done. And so I cleaned the floor, and I did it in the morning, and you had to wait so many hours before doing it again. And I did it again. And then we opened the window. I put a fan in there, and it was a little bit not great that night. Like it's next to our, where we sleep. But then it was okay. And then I could do a 3rd coat in the morning, and it would be dry by the night. And I did three coats, and then we went away, and I did another coat right before we left. And I came back, and that was the 4th coat is what really did it. But there was an area around the toilet that had like plywood, and there was a gouge out of the floor, and I should have looked at it I tried to fill it with polyurethane, which was stupid because that didn't work. But it was a pretty good sized gouge, and it's an old floor, and so I bought some plastic wood to put on the floor, right? And I was going to do. There's a little bit left of the polyurethane, and so the next time that we'll go out for the day, or we travel, I was going to put some on, and I had the idea there was just not that much left in it was a gallon jug of it or whatever, and I was wondering if it was still even good, because now I had to do a fifth coat and cover this plastic wood, and I didn't talk to anybody about it, didn't mention it to my wife, and the smoke was really bad, which I've been talking about, the air quality. So I wasn't going outside, it's on our front porch that's outside, and I wanted to shake it, right? It was on my mind to shake it to see if there was some left in there, or if I had to order maybe a small, whatever thing of it, right? And I kept on forgetting to do that. But finally I went out and I shook it, didn't say anything to anybody, didn't research it, it was just all happened in my mind, right? And 3 hours later I came in and I was looking at Facebook and there was an ad for polyurethane, right? Now I had the thought that I might need to get more of it. So this is, 2 years since I've ordered it, right? And, my wife and I hadn't talked about it really since I did it. I put the first coat on like 2 months ago. And so it's been a while or even longer. And so it hasn't been talked about by us, nothing. And I just had the thought of polyurethane, and they put an ad up for it. Now, I don't think they're reading my minds, but what? Like, what's the other explanation, right? I mean, I don't think they have the capacity to read people's mind. But did their algorithms are so acute, their AI bots, that they would just intuit based on all my other actions and, things that they're picking up from the environment, that maybe it would be time for me to order some more polyurethane? It isn't the same stuff I ordered. At least I don't think it was. But either way, there was no reason for them to advertise polyurethane for me when they've had a history. It's just so weird. Like my wife and I were talking about, like, and she knew that we hadn't talked about it, or there was no reference for it, right? I didn't look out, I didn't do anything on the computer. I just had an idea I should make sure I have enough to cover up that plastic wood, and maybe think about ordering another one. Maybe think about ordering another one after I see how much, was coverage it got. It might have enough for like 2 coats right around that area, because the rest of the floor doesn't need it. And, all of it. But that's effed up. Like, just think about that. Like, I mean, you could say it's a coincidence, but there's a pattern here. They just seem to always know what I need. Like, even before I need it. Like, it's like you become predictable in some ways, right? But this was an obscure company. I didn't order it on Amazon. I ordered the polyurethane through some sort of website that's for green building, that has low toxicity, low order paints and things like that, right? That's, more environmental friendly and less, toxic. And, I don't receive emails from them. I don't have any, I bought the stuff, they sent it to me, and that was it. Like, I haven't, thought about them or heard from them in 2 years. And so, it wasn't like I went to Home Depot and bought some polyurethane, or I bought it on, whatever it is. And now that I'm talking about right here, I know that I'll get more ads, right? Because, that's how it works. I mean, this is like, the level of intrusion into your life, and you have all these open mics around you. And again, I for the life of me, I don't understand how they came up with it. And so, in terms of the quality of air from Canada, my wife and I were talking about this. Canada to me is a lush place. It gets lots of rainfall. They have the Great Lakes there. They're, coastal. It's thinner than America. America has a ton of fresh water, and Canada, has a lot as well. And, they get a lot of snow and it melts, so they have a very, and the snow is going to melt at a later time there, right? Because it's colder. And so, I've been around, I lived in the West for a while. So I lived in New Mexico, in the 2000, like, I don't know, 1999, 2000, whatever it was. And then in Utah and Nevada. And I was around wildfires, right? I lived in New Mexico for quite some time. And where I worked, my coworker was one of those hikers. I talked about this guy before I recently told a story of him, I think, in my Journey series. He was the guy, or one of these videos. So he was the guy that, went out and did counseling for kids by camping. And he was an avid hiker. And he went into the Jemez, I don't forget how to pronounce it, near Los Alamos. Beautiful place. You'd see elk and wild turkey running around there. A little bit more water there, a little bit less, arid desert. And they had these wonderful ponderosa pines that some of them were like 100, 200 years old, tall, big trees. And then he came back to work one day. He said, where I was hiking is completely gone. Like it's burnt. My family and I, we went to the north side of the Grand Canyon, and there had been a forest fire, and it just wipes out huge chunks of woods. And when I was in New Mexico, there was a fire in Houston, and we got some of the smoke from Houston. It's just the way the wind blows, whatever it is, for like a day or two. And it wasn't nearly as bad as this, and it was much closer. Like, I've never seen or heard of smoke descending into cities and staying there, and then, out of a scale of 1 to 5, the city being on a 5 of how bad the air is, right? And some of these places have their own pollution problems and things like that, but, there's cities in Michigan and Chicago the last couple of days that were, they had the worst air in the world. And I've been to some of these polluted cities, 40 million people, in India, some of these places that have poor air quality all the time. And, so you take Canada, that I've never heard of them having a wildfire before. This has never happened before. And the sky is saturated. It's blocked out. Like there's a change in the color of the sky for days where you can't see, clearly. It's not clouds. It's, it's a haze. It just doesn't seem right. It seems, man-made in some way. I was going to cover this, I guess, on my other channel, but I just finish it here. So I looked up, there was a tweet my wife sent me that had these chemicals in it. Somebody said that they measured it, and it had these chemicals in it, and it shouldn't be there. And I couldn't find the actual original tweet or, any of it. Like, it didn't exist. And there was no other information saying that this happened. Other people would be monitoring the air. But the one thing that I did find was people were saying that the smoke smelled like plastic. And they were explaining why that is. And forest fire smoke shouldn't smell like plastic. I'm working on a couple of things that, like, I have a pond liner that outgasses, and a couple of things, so it's hard for me to say if, I've smelled that or if it's something else. But, it sounds like there's something toxic going on here. And it just doesn't seem like, why hasn't this ever happened before? Where Canada has wildfires that block out the sky in multiple U.S. cities all across the central and east coast of the country. Like, why is it just happening now? When it's never happened before. Like, it's never had this effect before. But anyways, I got one more thing to say on a voiceover later, but we'll get to that about this athletes, these biological males competing with women. I got to, first I want to Kennedy talks about that, so I want to get to that first. And then we'll come back to that. But let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, so this first segment is about how real truth stings. And let's start here. It's the best place to start. Forget about Hunter Biden. What about Jared and Ivanka's grift? Forget about Hunter Biden. If this was the word with Hammer Boy, this would be his word. Forget about Hunter Biden, right? I bet you guys want to forget about Hunter. But this is the problem. This is from MSNBC, right? They both want, both the right and the left want to forget about the other side's corruption. And they're both corrupt. So this is Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, who Donald Trump handed the keys to the kingdom. And they looted. They were able to extract millions, even billions of dollars of resources and connections through the Trump presidency, right? And this is Jared Kushner. He purchased 666 Fifth Avenue. Now, of course, Trump said that he could go out in the street and shoot someone in the face in Fifth Avenue and not lose any of his support. Timeline, and these are the... And Jared Kushner bought this building, right? Which is, there was a TV show, 666 Park Avenue, which was about, hell and the devil. Timeline on Jared Kushner's Qatar, 666 Fifth Avenue and White House policy. Here's 666 Fifth Avenue. Says that somewhere down here. Kushner Properties in 2007. Democrats launched probe into Kushner's 666 Fifth Avenue bailout. So if you're a right-wing person and you want to hammer Hunter Biden, which you should, because Hunter Biden's great for you and you Trumpers, you also have to accept the truth about Trump and his corruption. Trump and Biden are equally corrupt. I think Trump's maybe even a little better at it. I think Trump family got more money out of Trump's presidency than the Bidens got out of Biden's long-lasting political career. So I think the Trumps are actually good at it. They're good at this thing. I think that the family has made the most business-wise out of Trump's presidency. But they're both the same level. Like they're both, Trump might be better at it, but they're both equally scummy, right? And MSNBC here, they want you to forget about Hunter Biden. Why would you want to forget about Hunter Biden? He's a wonderful story. He's the president's crackhead son, drops laptops into tubs. He bangs strippers named Dallas and impregnates them with crackhead stripper babies. I mean, what a great character. You can't ignore him, but they want to, right? The deep dive. Now, this is a reference to truther stuff, right? They love to take truther terms. They're going to go do a deep dive here. A deep dive would be going into the truth that hurts you, the truth that you don't want to face. A deep dive for them would be going into Hunter Biden. A deep dive for you you Trumpers would be going into the corruption that Trump is, right? That you want to deny. And that's real truth, the truth that hurts you, the truth that conflicts with your belief system.
Can you remember the summer of 2012?
Yeah, what a great summer. When the world didn't end, right? When we thought the world might end and it didn't. Yeah, we remember that.
Than a decade ago. The Olympics were kicking off in London. Mitt Romney was preparing to challenge Barack Obama for the presidency.
What a great year.
And two of Donald Trump's kids were at the center of a criminal investigation against them. Yes.
Kaboom. Yeah, I don't remember that at all, but go ahead.
Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr. It's a story few people know happened, and it begins in Lower Manhattan.
Located in the center of Manhattan's chic artist enclave, the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Soho is the site of my latest development.
Kaboom.
Trump's new hotel, which technically wasn't even in Soho, was completed just before the 2008 Great Recession.
Mocking a Trump Soho. You had to get the shot in at Trump and not having legitimate Soho property.
Marketing was tailored to overseas investors, including, quote, a lot of money pouring in from Russia, Donald Trump Jr. told a reporter in 2008. It was also the first big project, the coming out, if you will, for Ivanka Trump and Don Jr. Possess your own Soho, read ads for the timeshares showing Ivanka lounging over the Manhattan skyline. Conveniently, there were Russian translations. And
no way. Russia was involved with Trump?
According to Ivanka and Don Jr., there were plenty of eager buyers for the units, which started at $1.2 million. She told Reuters in mid-2008, as the real estate market was barreling towards a crash, that about 60% of the units had already been sold, and the project had seen constant demand since sales began.
I bet those are all lies.
The only problem, that wasn't true.
Deep dive. This guy's deep dive is going back to 2012 and saying that they lied about Soho, right? The Trumpers.
And Ivanka. Less than 6 months later, Kasowitz sent even more money to the DA's campaign. Kasowitz ended up donating more than $30,000 to Vance's re-election bid. And just before Election Day 2013, Kasowitz even hosted a fundraiser for Vance as well. It didn't look good, and by 2017, after this Trump Soho story broke, Vance was telling the New York Times that he had returned Kasowitz's money.
So they're saying that they bribed the district attorney here, but now they get into Jared and Ivanka made up to $640 million in the White House.
$140 million, according to an analysis of financial disclosures by the ethics watchdog Crew. And just for good measure, Kushner got another $2 billion of investment money.
This is an evil MNF. Look at this guy. You know, Jared Kushner, there were credible sources that said that when he would talk to you at a party, he would say to you, I got to stop talking to you now because I want to talk to somebody who's more important. Right? Like he's a real just, I mean, there's something just, look at the guy, right? Like, you know, this guy could be, you know, I'm not saying he is, the Antichrist, right? And he got so much power in the Trump White House. Donald put so much of the White House, his presidency, in Kushner's hands, and the guy made the most of it. Now they've kind of backed away from Trump as the criminal stuff is going on. You know, he uses people just like Trump does. And, you know, they're not going to be a part of the next White House, but they've already made their killing, right? And all the focus is on Trump. But, you know, again, the same behaviors. But like this guy, you know, he doesn't say anything here about Hunter Biden. So here it is coming up.
From Saudi Arabia after leaving the White House. Yes, $2 billion with a B. A lot of people probably haven't heard these stories about Trump's daughter and his son-in-law, which is interesting considering how many people these days have heard the name Hunter Biden.
Exactly. It's so unfair to Hunter. It's just so unfair to Hunter.
Yes, the son of the current Democratic president with whom Republicans have been obsessed in a birtherism, Benghazi, Hillary emails kind of way. Yes, Hunter Biden, who just last week pled guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of tax evasion and a felony firearms charge for crimes dating back to 2017 and 2018.
Okay, so I know this guy isn't going to say anything, but they lied about his laptop. They misled people about the laptop. This guy's network and social media, especially Twitter, but all of social media and all of mainstream media, even kind of Fox News, suppressed the Hunter Biden story right before the 2020 election, which definitely would have won the election, won the presidency for Trump in a legitimate voting type of situation, right? And so they're pretending like he's minimizing Hunter Biden the same way you Trumpers minimize Trump, because it's the truth you don't want to face, that both your guys are corrupt, evil scumbags, right? And their families suck just as bad.
A plea deal brokered and accepted by the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in Delaware. To be clear, Hunter Biden is far from any kind of paragon of virtue. He did a lot of dodgy things, including trading off his last name and his dad's various government job titles to make money for himself. He had no business, for example, being
smoke crack
on the board of a Ukrainian energy firm. And yes, he has since admitted to crimes. But none of that justifies the GOP obsession with Hunter Biden. The sprawling, outlandish...
Oh, it totally justifies it. And Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Joe Biden's a scumbag. He always has. He's a groper, snoozler. And he's, you know, Trump and Biden have similar flaws. They both have issues with women. You know, Trump has cheated on his wives. He's involved in these pageants. He said he could grab him by the you-know-what. Biden is seen glomming on women and doing all these things. They both have said, you know, old guy racist things. They're the same guy. They have very similar personality types. They would be in the same category. They're very similar. You got a choice between 2 old white guys that have the same kind of issues. Trump went into business. Biden went into politics. Both of them are corrupt. Trump went bankrupt twice. Biden got caught plagiarizing. I mean, they've had all these, you know, indiscretions, and they both suck in this way. But people who are Democrats have an obsession with Trump like this guy does. This guy's got his own fish boy thing going on. I stopped him and, like, you know, I'm catching fish boy left and right. It's like this thing, it's a demon, fish boy demon that's inhabiting people. But the left and the right are both, you know, ignoring their guy, and they hate on, you know, these other guys, right? So that's, you know, that's a little bit more here.
conspiracy theories that the GOP have constructed around Hunter and Joe Biden without any.
We know that, Elon Musk divulged how Twitter banned the story from New York Post that turned out to be true that influenced the election, and how the government covered up for Hunter Biden, and still is, right? Now, you could say Hunter Biden's worse, but the Trumps made far more money. We'll get into Christie in a moment because there's this thing about him. They both suck. That's the point. That you don't have a choice between a good guy and a bad guy. You have a choice between two bad guys. And you can say one's worse or one's better. It doesn't matter. You're voting for a bad guy. You're voting for a guy who goes against the will of God. A guy who is, a selfish person who is keeping a system afloat and taking as much out of that system as they can for them and their family, screwing you over and setting up for a post-apocalyptic type of situation.
Evidence. The Biden crime family, they say, used the Biden DOJ to get Hunter a...
Okay, so, this isn't a deep dive, bro. So then Christie talks about Trump here. Now, I got somebody who commented and said, I would never believe Christie is a piece of crap because you're a Trumper. You believe Christie when he was in Trump's corner. You like Christie then. You like Christie when he was supporting your guy, right? But now you don't. Like, this is how it's gone with all the people that were once close to Trump that have, Trump turned on them or threw him under the bus. I showed you the story where Trump asked Christie not to divulge that he might be responsible for Christie getting COVID. And when Christie was in intensive care, Christie said that he was then told that Trump threw him under the bus and said that Christie gave him COVID. And then they came out that, they were doing debate training for preparation for Trump. It came out that Trump tested positive before he went in, and he gave 5 people COVID, right? Like, this is, very consistent with other stories we've heard about Trump.
We were just talking about the state of the 2024 race, and you, obviously, what sets you apart is that you were willing to go after Trump in a way that no one else in the 2024 field does. We see Asa Hutchinson and Will Hurd, they do criticize him, but not in the way that you have done. Do you believe that those who don't are making a mistake you made in 2016?
Exactly. I think they're making a mistake not only that I made.
Now, this guy is, there's a character in that Native American movie with Kevin Costner, Dances with Wolves. And there's a military guy who's lost his mind. There's some like general or something. And Kevin Costner goes to him, and the guy's like kind of morbidly obese, and he's drunk, and he says he just peed himself, like he says that to Costner. And there's an actor, and he looks very much like Christie. They have similar mannerisms, And so, I'd show you the clip, but I don't need to. Well, I guess we can let's go find it. So here's the guy here.
I am sending you on a night's errand. You will report to Captain Cargill at the furthermost outpost of the realm.
This is Christie. If Chris Christie was going to be playing a movie, it'd be this guy. That's a great thing there.
I just pissed in my pants, and nobody can do anything about it.
So this guy was actually a major. So even with that, I believe Chris Christie about Trump because he was there and Trump does seedy things, and he was inside with Trump, and now he's using his inside information to go after him.
But that Jeb Bush made, and Marco Rubio made, and Ted Cruz made, and John Kasich made, that we didn't go after Trump early enough, and we allowed a certain narrative to set in about Donald Trump that then became impossible for us to change or overcome.
Because the Trumpers are not very bright. They believe Trump's a great salesman. He's great selling himself. And they bought into it. They believed what Trump was selling. And all the evidence in the world and all the circumstances and all the stuff that Trump's done since couldn't change that. And Trump was surprised. That's when he gave the Fifth Avenue speech, right? And that's an actual, that's fact. That Trump wasn't taken seriously. These candidates thought that he would fade, and they wanted his support, and they thought it would be bad for them to go after Trump. They never thought he was going to win, and they didn't even think he was serious about winning. Which, if you go back and watch the last debate between Hillary and Trump just packed it in. He quit. He gave up. I was like, oh my God, he's just quitting. I was kind of stunned by it, right? But then, somehow, like, the polls were against him, and I think he was just trying to milk whatever he could get out of it. But he had no energy, really wasn't fighting against Hillary like he was in the other debates. He just sort of was, like, resolved that he was going to lose. And then there was, like, a twist of fate, right?
And so, look, he has been a major world figure for the last 8 years. And so we're not going to be able to knock down his numbers or shake some of his support. I've been in the race for 3 weeks, but we have, 7 months until the first people vote. And my message will be heard by then. And I think the American people care about the truth, Caitlin. I really do. And I think
they care about the truth.
Republican Party cares about the truth. And I think they want to hear it, but no one's
American people just care about the truth so much. They want the truth.
been saying it to them. And I'm going to say it to them over the next 7 months.
We have questions about your fundraising, but on Donald Trump's fundraising, he has quietly begun diverting money that he is raising for his 2024 campaign into a political action committee that he has used, which we can see from filings, for his personal legal fees. What do you make of that?
It's disgraceful.
It's a disgrace. See, Trump will take your money and use it any way he any way he sees fit. And he's done this before. And this is not, this is a fact. These aren't fake news. Trump has taken money and, Trump will do anything that he's able to get away with. And he said this in his Apprentice show, like pushing the law, all these things. When they asked him about taxes, he said, you guys all want to pay all the taxes you owe, which I liked about him. He was at least sort of honest about it, right? Like, why would you pay more if you could pay less? Nobody wants to pay them. And so, the Trump will bend the rules and do everything and skirt up against the law and even cross the line if he thinks he can get away with it. He loved that guy Blagojevich, who was really funny, the former mayor of Chicago. He was on his show and, Trump praised him. And, Blagojevich was just on these tapes saying, oh my God, we're golden. We're going to, we're going to milk this thing for everything. And Trump loved him, right? This is Trump's idea of a good businessman. And, Blagojevich was great. I'd like to see him, he'll never come back, but he was funny. The tapes were great.
It's disgraceful. He's going to middle-class men and women in this country, and they're donating $15, $25, $50, $100 because they believe in Donald Trump and they want him to be president again. They're not giving that money so he can pay his personal legal fees. And let's remember something. He's a billionaire. He's a billionaire, self-professed billionaire. Why can't he use his own money to pay his personal?
Yeah, why can't he? Because they don't have any money. It's all facade. If you ever see the J. Paul Getty film, it's got money in the title. I forget what it was. Don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. It wasn't a great movie, but J. Paul Getty had his favorite grandson was kidnapped, and he wouldn't pay for his ransom. They cut off the guy's finger, and spoiler alert. But all the money in the world, it's called, and eventually his mom and people came and said, you got to pay. They set into J. Paul Getty. I think he was an oil baron. And I think he was the richest man in the world at the time. And he said, you know what? I don't have any money. Because to avoid taxes, he put all his money in foundations and he didn't have any cash just to go and get $1 million or whatever, even though he had all this money to pay for his grandson's release. And eventually he was able to access some of his capital. But these rich people tie all their money up. They pay for their private jets through corporations and, they have all these ways of getting around personal income and paying income tax and, all the rest of it. And so they don't have access to money like people think they do. A lot of it is money that they're able to borrow. It's, a billionaire is someone who can borrow a lot of money and then put it into something that's going to bring them more money in return than the interest it's costing them to borrow the money. I've talked about this before. And so Trump, rich people, they're all cheap.
Legal fees and not use money coming from the public. It's disgraceful. And it's a continued grift. And look, the Trump family has been involved in grifting for quite some time. He was doing this in terms of the people who got paid out of this PAC before, whether it was Kimberly Guilfoyle or other members of the family. Jared Kushner, 6 months after.
So Kimberly Guilfoyle, who gave that weird speech, I'd show it again, but, I got other things to cover here. But she was dating his son, and she was being paid as a consultant through donors' money, right? So that's money that's going from donors to Trump into his family. His family's receiving money through payment because they all worked. Like, Trump knows how to work a grift, right? Trump knows how to work a scam. He's good at it. This is how he was successful.
He leaves the White House, gets $2 billion from the Saudi sovereign wealth fund when Donald Trump had put him in a position to be in the Middle East. What was Jared Kushner doing in the Middle East? We had Rex Tillerson and Mike Pompeo as secretaries of state. We didn't need Jared Kushner. He was put there to make those relationships.
See, the left isn't going to push these narratives because they like Kushner. They're not going after Ivanka and Kushner. They don't want to go after Hunter Biden either, but they're going after Trump for other things because they don't want you to know how corrupt it is. They don't want you to know how slimy these politicians are. Because, if you're really into Trump or you really hate Trump and you embrace Biden, if you understood how corrupt and scummy the guy that you're voting for is and how, bad the other guy is as well, worse than you thought, then you're going to lose faith in the system. They're going to go after smaller things like, election fraud and all the things that, like classified documents. They're not going to go after the character, even though they've hammered Trump on his character and the looting of your money, taxpayer money. That Jared Kushner got billions of dollars from the Saudis and they were using your political donations for, Trump's legal fund or whatever it is. The left isn't going to go after that. They'll mention it to their audience, but they don't want Trumpers to know about it because they don't want people to lose faith in the system. And if you really look at it, you would. Because the system, they're so corrupt. We're talking about so much money being looted here.
And then he cashed in on those relationships when he left the office. So what Donald Trump's doing now is just a continuation of what he's permitted his family to do over the entire course of his time as president.
Why do you think he's not using his own money to pay for his legal fees?
Because he's the cheapest person I've ever met in my life.
This is the other thing that I've talked about. People who love money are cheap. That J. Paul Getty thing, right? He had his family members, Warren Buffett isn't turning his money over to his inheritance to his family members. These guys who have lots of money, you think, oh, they'll be generous. They're not. They're hoarders of money. They're hoarding billions of dollars of resources while their brothers and sisters around the world starve. Master Charge, the third master of the Sajmark meditation system that I do, he said rich people don't pray. Because if they prayed, they would open their hearts and realize that they could help. They could spread a lot of that wealth around. He talked about how, love is meant to flow, the difference between a pond and a river. And a pond stinks. A pond grows algae. There's no flow to it. But a river doesn't retain the water. A pond does, a body of water that, that sits there. But, a pond that is, that has an overflow or has a river connected to it is something different, right? It's cleaner and all these things. But a pond that just sits there is doomed to be it's like hoarding resources, right? Whereas a river, you let it flow through you. And really rich people, you can be somewhat rich, right? But people who really have a lot of money, they don't spend their own money and they just accumulate more and more. It's how they keep score. There was an image I have, I'm not going to show you it. But, they talked about hoarders. Rich people are hoarders of money and they're considered, good people or, desirable, It's desirable to be rich, a billionaire. And people are like, oh, Mr. Trump, Mr. This, that, and the other thing, right? Oh, yeah, Mr. Trump, like there's some greatness to him being a billionaire. And, Trump got upset and sued somebody who said he wasn't a billionaire. And then he lost that suit because it turned out he wasn't. And some reporter claimed that he was, it's just all a scam. But they're cheap. I've known this, and he's just confirming it here. Let me just expand on this. I'm in the editing process. There's a famous line from the movie Wall Street where Charlie Sheen says to Michael Douglas, how many yachts do you need to water ski behind? So there's a certain point where you have so much money you can't ever spend it. It's almost like a curse at that point because that money's supposed to go somewhere. It's money power. There's a power there. It's supposed to go somewhere. I've talked about power grossness being the worst thing according to the Sage-Marg tradition. If you have a power and you don't use it, you have an ability and you don't use it, a God-given ability, it becomes the hardest grossness to clean off, right? It solidifies. And so you're supposed to use what you're given. And if you have so much money, you can't ever do that. You can't put it to use. And you're just trying to accumulate more and hoard it. That's a psychological disorder. A need to accumulate far beyond anything that you could use. And so these people who just keep on accumulating more and they never want to stop. And they look at it as competition. I want to be the richest man or whatever it is, right? Richest person in the world or on the list or a billionaire or trillionaire or whatever. And it's like an obsession. And, if you have any sort of a heart and you can see people suffering everywhere, you would want to help them in some way. And you have the ability to do that. At least help some of them. And you can, do something to help people. But instead of doing that, they just try to extract more wealth. And so when they're in negotiation with ordinary people, people who do work for them, like vendors with Trump, they're going to try to screw the person over. They're always trying to win when it comes to money. Money is a competition. It's how they keep score. And they're constantly screwing people over. There's a scene from like the second season of Succession, and the father, the main guy, the patriarch in the show, they're going to a Hamptons home. They fly out in their helicopters, corporate paid helicopters, and they're going to have a couple days at their Hampton house. And they get there and it stinks because he hasn't paid a contractor what he owes him, and the contractor stuffs dead raccoons into his chimney. And so the whole house stinks. And so the guy calls the contractor over and said he owes him like $300,000. He's saying, I'm going to pay you $100,000. You're going to finish the work and you're going to like it. And he goes, my lawyer was the president's lawyer. Who's your lawyer? Right? And so, it's a good indication of how these things work. They screw over ordinary people. Even though you're thinking, I'm rich and working for a rich man, I can make a lot of money. People want to do business with Trump, and they always end up getting screwed. Not just Trump, but all these guys, because they're cheap and they're in it to win it, and they have the ability to rig the system so they will win, and they're going to screw every little guy they can to extract more and more. They're penny counters, right? They have billions of dollars because they count pennies, because they're into money, right? And that's what makes them completely effed up in so many different ways. All right, let's get back to it here. So I want to cover Robert Kennedy Jr. here just briefly, and I have something to say about the whole biological men competing with biological women.
How do you align what you believe and what you know in terms of what actually happened?
The evidence, the mountain of evidence that the CIA was not only involved in my uncle's murder, but that but they were also managed the cover-up and continue to. They still won't release the last 5,000 documents. Is beyond any reasonable doubt. I'm an attorney. I've tried hundreds of cases. I have no doubt at all that I could try that case and convict certain members of the CIA.
All right, so that's number one, right? So I'm not going to vote, and I've made my position on this clear. But in terms of the person who most represents what I believe and many of you believe, it's this guy, at least in terms of the people that could win. Of course, he's from the Kennedy crime family, all these things, right? I'm not, it's whatever it is. But what he's saying and his positions, some of these longstanding positions, and the way he's saying it is much more believable than Trump courting the truth community, right? This is a guy who's liberal. He has many liberal positions. He's from a family of Democrats. He's running as a Democrat, and yet he holds many truther positions in terms of the boop, right? The COVID boop, and in terms of the, assassination, and also in terms of this new issue in terms of biological men competing with, or biological boys competing with women. And let me show you the other two things here. So this is from 2013. Remember, there was a Kennedy that was tried for murder. And he gets into it with CNN here and says CNN is biased.
Since, I published an article, I think in 2003 in the Atlantic Monthly about the case after the trial. And after that, I was contacted by one of the people, by a man named Toby Bryant, who is actually a cousin of the basketball player.
So this is from 2013, 10 years ago. This guy.
Toby Bryant. And Tony Bryant told me that he was there the night of the murder, that he brought to Greenwich the two men who murdered Martha Moxley. They said prior to the murder that they were going to take her caveman style. They were two kids from New York City, a very big man who was 6'3", 250 pounds, who now lives in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The other one lives in Portland, Oregon. I have spoken to both of them. One of them is black. When Martha Moxley's body was found, it was covered with hairs from a black person, which wait a second, Robert.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. Your article in the
So this is Jeffrey Tobin. You might remember him. He got caught pleasuring himself on a Zoom call and was suspended briefly, and then came back disgraced, but is now still working for CNN. And this guy is looking shady.
Is this Jeffrey Tobin?
Yes. Your article in the Atlantic.
Well, and Jeffrey, you should disclose that from the beginning, you have absolutely been dogged long before Michael was convicted, that Michael was guilty.
No.
And that was your bias from the beginning.
No,
and
my
that was
bias.
Every news report that you did on that, Jeffrey, was...
my bias was watching the trial and watching the evidence, and I, like the jury, thought he was guilty. But what I read in today's opinion was that the judge completely rejected the whole Kobe Bryant thing. He rejected the argument
Tony Bryant
that Mickey Sherman made to the jury, and the argument that you made in your Atlantic article that the real killer.
So he had a thing with CNN way back when. I thought his cousin was guilty, but I didn't really do much research into it. But that's whatever that is. So this is from The Hill 2 weeks ago.
To transgender people, to people who were born as biological males, participating in competitive female sports. If the sports, and I'll tell you why. My uncle was the author of Title IX, and he spent years and years allied with women's groups who were being treated like redheaded stepchildren when it came to, by colleges and everybody else, when it came to organized sports.
What did they got against redheads?
My uncle fought for, wrote, and passed Title IX, and it finally gave women the ability to participate in sports. And it doesn't make any sense to me that somebody who has the advantages, the physical advantages of being born a biological male in muscle mass, in height, and size, and strength, and coordination should be able to walk off a playing field playing men's sports and then walk onto a playing field playing women's sports. And that, I want to start by saying this, though. Anybody who makes that choice to be gender should not be shamed. They should not be embarrassed.
Okay, so this is a liberal person who comes from the Democratic Party, but he is much more aligned with people in the truth community. You know, Trump didn't speak out on this issue during his presidency. He let this stuff happen. It happened during his presidency. And all these other people who, you know, claim to be truthers. So, you know, I don't know what's going to happen for this guy or the rest of the elective field. And again, I'm not voting, but he is the person right now that represents what most of us believe. I have just a few more thoughts on this, and I want to return to the whole thing I was talking about, them somehow figuring out that I had thought about polyurethane for my floor. And I have something to add to that I forgot. But first, you know, the argument here that no one can dispute on the oppositional side. And I don't, you know, I'm not a debater and I don't care about this stuff. It doesn't really affect me. The stuff that affects me affects me. The other stuff, it's for future generations. It's something that's happening and it's going to go one way or another because the people aren't going to rise up, right? The people have been pacified, so they can do whatever they want. And as long as people have internet and electricity and food, people will get mad about things, talk about things that they won't do anything to change it. And, you know, we've seen that borne out. But in terms of this issue, you know, I was saying this to my wife this morning, that you don't hear anyone from the male sports world complaining about women competing with them, you know, biological women who are female to male, right? Someone like Elliot Page, the actor Elliot Page, someone like that was born a female and then becomes a male and takes testosterone. So the argument gets, you know, this argument that biological men, after they take estrogen for a while, don't have a physical advantage, falls apart right there. It gets blown up because biological women who then become men through taking testosterone, and testosterone is banned in many sports. Taking testosterone in the Olympics and bike racing and I don't know what other professional sports, but taking testosterone is not something you get to do, right? It's, you know, it's illegal, disqualifies you, it's considered cheating. But you have these biological women who are taking testosterone, and if they wanted to compete against men or boys, whatever, high school level or even younger, they would not make the team. Very seldomly would you see a biological woman who was able to even make the team, and nobody would be saying it's unfair because she's physically superior, that the woman is better equipped to play the sport. And we've seen this, you know, borne out in athletics for years, that women don't do as well as men athletically. And so nobody's complaining about biological women becoming men and competing. They're not saying they're wrecking sports because they're not going to be able to compete, right? And so right there is all you need to know. Like, if someone should just say this in these court testimonies. I don't know if somebody did, but it's an obvious point. Because when I was in high school, I played freshman soccer, and there was a girl who played on our team because there was no girls' team. This is all the way, you know, 1978 or whatever. And girls' soccer was becoming popular, but girls didn't have the same sports. There was field hockey for girls. Soccer was a relatively new sport in, you know, high school athletics, and, you know, in terms of, you know, it was not there. Maybe it was just starting when I was, you know, like a kid. And nobody complained about the girl being on the team. In fact, I looked at her, I was like, it must be hard for her, like, coming out there. And she was all right. You know, she was, you know, feisty, as I remember. But I don't think she was really, if they did cuts, she wouldn't have made the team. She wasn't, you know, she was probably one of the worst players, if not, she was probably the worst player there, right? But, you know, it wasn't a big deal because there wasn't girls' teams. Later on, there was girls' teams, and then, like, you know, it was something that was just starting. But, you know, it wasn't like she had an unfair advantage. But if that had been a boy who went to play girls' field hockey because there's no field hockey team, it would have been a problem, right? Because the boy, unless it was somebody small and unathletic, would have probably dominated, and it would have been an issue. And so it's just, you know, a no-brainer. This thing's a no-brainer. Like, it's just, you know, in so many ways. So, I don't talk to people who would dispute any of this because, I wouldn't want to waste my energy. But if I were, this is what I would say to them. Why aren't the men complaining about women who get the advantage of taking testosterone coming in and dominating them and it being unfair? Because they really can't compete because biological men have an advantage. The thing I wanted to get to before, which I forgot when I was talking about them somehow figuring out that I wanted polyurethane without mentioning it out loud at all. Somehow they read my mind. This was sent to me by my wife. Advertisers push back against Google after a report accuses the tech titan of faulty video ad placement. A 3-minute vitamin ad, no skip button. Google is facing intense scrutiny after a ad analyzed Biz said that the Silicon Valley giant repeatedly broke its own policies for video ad placement. Google's YouTube alone takes it 8% of the $47 billion spent yearly on U.S. digital ads. Takes in 8% of the $47 billion spent yearly on digital ads, and brand name advertisers shell out big bucks for prime YouTube and web page placement. But this week, research from Analytics dropped a bombshell alleging that Google has violated the fine print of its video ad deals 80% of the time, which potentially costs advertisers billions. The report said that the ads ran in muted, autoplayed formats or appeared on undesirable websites like clickbait, and said that Macy's, Disney's, American Express, government agencies like Medicare and Social Security Administration were possibly affected. Google disputed the findings in a report, saying it makes many claims that are inaccurate, but that hasn't stopped some businesses from asking for their money back. And so, I've been dealing with Google ads here, right? And, it's become a joke and something that I'm just using for content. I'm not spending a lot of money on it, but I'm getting zero return. Like I'm losing subscribers right now. See if I pull it up here. It says that I'm spending $8 a day, which went up from $4. I'm getting a 32% view rate, which is high, but I'm getting no subscribers from this. My subscriber rate has gone down, and they're not tracking subscribers. But I gave them all these various channels that you guys recommended. Many of you guys remember this. I asked people, and again, it's over with. Please don't recommend channels. And I, got 40 or so channels because I saw the channels they were running ads on, and they weren't the kind of people that are watching those videos weren't the kind of people like my channel. They completely was a swing and a miss. YouTube had no way of deciphering, even though I have plenty of content on my channel. And my ad itself was, I went through this. I told you guys all about this. They don't have categories for us because we're considered undesirable, even though half of America has some sort of conspiracy theories or truther beliefs. And so they don't want to look at us as a demographic or acknowledge that we are one. And then they don't have anything for God or spirituality, not very much for homesteading and alternative medicine. They just have mainstream crap for like robotic people who just go along and believe the official story, which is very few people. And those people are, I don't even know if they're a desirable marketing demographic, but it's the one that YouTube has. And so I gave them all these channels, and up to my knowledge now, there doesn't appear to be any ads running on any of the channels I gave them. In fact, I got to email my guy over there and say, WTF. Because now, they're doubling what they're spending, and it's failing, miserably, and they're not running ads where I want them to run ads. I gave them, the ads, the places. And they said it would take 3 months to figure out my channel and my ad and see where it was working. And, not to judge too early. But everything I've seen so far is, it's a joke. Their system's an absolute joke. And if they can, if the internet can figure out that I'm thinking about polyurethane, right? If they can figure that out, then they certainly could figure out where to run my ads. And they also could figure out ways not to purge my subscribers so that my money that I'm spending on ads seems like, if they just stopped purging subscribers, I would gain subscribers. If they just recommended my channel and my videos to people who want to watch it, which they know, they're suppressing that, and they're suppressing that for so many different people. It's just not me. Then my channel would grow, and then the ad, I'd have more money to give them ad revenue. But they're purposely sabotaging it, and they're developing algorithms and bots to sabotage, channels like mine, but channels in general. And they can't even do it right for the corporate channels, which I just read. And so not only as a person who's buying ad time with Google, but I also am, surviving, or my financial model depends on YouTube's ads running on my channel. And I'm like, I have no faith in them. They're so incompetent. They're doing a Fetterman. They're like Fetterman level competent right